Most people are unaware of the potential of Lombok because they haven't been there. But it's just a 30-minute flight from Bali, and in my opinion, even more beautiful. It has some of the best beaches that I've ever been to, warm blue water, great surf breaks, including some beginner breaks that are like being in a wave pool.
Welcome to the VCA podcast. At Value Creation Alternative, we often speak about finding the missing piece, the overlooked element that can unlock value, accelerate growth, or reveal opportunities that are not yet visible to the wider market. Today's conversation is a good illustration of that philosophy. We are looking at Lombok, Indonesia, an island often described as the new Bali, but which may in fact represent something more specific, a premium tourism and hospitality market still early enough for disciplined, well-planned development to shape the future rather than simply follow the crowds. Our guest today is Oliver Thirlwall from Altai Land. Oliver has been involved in land development in Lombok for more than 10 years. Altai Land's current project focuses on a 77-hectare peninsula on Lombok's south coast, close to the government-backed Mandalika tourism development, with approximately 2.8 kilometers of ocean frontage and a proposed master plan combining serviced villa plots, luxury resort components, commercial areas, beach clubs, and a long-term estate management. Oliver has been a VCA member since May 2011. At VCA, we are particularly interested in opportunities that sit in the unknown-unknowns space, opportunities that are not obvious at first glance because the value is not in one single asset, but in the combination of the right land, the right timing, the right capital, the right operating partners, and the right strategic execution. So today, we will not look at this simply as a real estate project. We will explore whether South Lombok could become one of those overlooked frontier opportunities where an ecosystem approach can unlock significant value. Oliver, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Christophe.
Oliver, could you briefly introduce yourself, Altai Land, and how you became involved in Lombok?
Thanks, Christophe. I went to business school in Spain, in Barcelona at ESE. And after that, I spent my career basically in Asia and mostly in real estate finance and mostly with Merrill Lynch. And after leaving China, I actually spent a bit of time in Mongolia, almost 9 years for my sins. And I'm now back in Sydney. But specifically how I came involved in Lombok, I have a brother who lives there. And he's been there since 2014. And he went looking for somewhere in Southeast Asia, which could, somewhere that he wanted to live, that he also wanted to do some property development, and he stumbled upon Lombok. He wanted lifestyle with development potential. I was living in Mongolia at the time, and Mongolia's got this terrible winter. It lasts for about 6 months. It gets down to minus 35 in January, minus 35 degrees Celsius. And it was just glorious to trade minus 35 for plus 35 during the Mongolian winter. So I visited, almost annually on a vacation for about 10 years. And then I decided last year to get involved in development. So I set up Altai Land. Altai refers to the Altai Mountains in West Mongolia, bordering Mongolia, China to the south, Kazakhstan to the west, and Russia to the north. I've climbed those mountains actually, and they're well worth going to if you want some adventure. But I wanted to keep a bit of Mongolia in my next venture. That's how the name Altai was born.
Wow, that is a bit of a story. So you've spent more than 10 years developing land in Lombok. What do you see early on that many international investors were not yet seeing?
Well, it was really my brother who saw the potential early because I was just there on holiday and surfing and having a break from the winter. But he looked at it from a surf tourism lens. And of course, surf tourism has been on the rise everywhere. And they even surf in England, in the north of England. But anyway, it's been big in Southeast Asia for a couple of decades now. It's still growing. And it's actually a great thing to see places overlooked by tourism generally. And then some surfers turn up and they discover a great surf break. They tell their mates, and suddenly it's on the map and it's developing. And I also like the surf tourism aspect. I'm not really a surfer, I'm just a beginner, but I was amazed by the surf breaks in Lombok. There are a couple of surf breaks that are just like being in a wave pool. The waves are big, they're big enough to carry you, but they don't give you the sort of punishment that they do in Australia, where you spend an hour in the water, getting dumped, and at the end of that hour, you get out and you feel like you've been in a washing machine for the last hour and you've had a great workout, but you didn't catch any waves. And it was bloody hard work. So that was fantastic. And Lombok was also beautiful. The beaches are spectacular. They're as good as anything I've ever seen. And as Australians, we tend to be sort of beach snobs. But the beaches were impressive. There was green tropical hills that are perfect for cycling and running. And I should mention Bali because Bali is always used as a direct comparison to Lombok. And I thought that Lombok had real advantages compared to Bali. White sand and blue water versus Bali's volcanic sand and grey water. Wide open with good infrastructure, where Bali is overcrowded and difficult to get around. And Lombok's been a tourist destination for decades, but the emphasis was on the west and the north, the Gili Islands. And the south, which is where the surf comes in, only started developing in 2011 when the airport was moved from it's an international airport, it was moved from the west to the south. And expanded, and that really opened up the south. So, look, in summary, it was physically stunning, and it was relatively undeveloped and full of opportunity. And so I thought, this is perfect.
At VCA, we often look for the missing piece that unlocks value. In your view, what is the missing piece in South Lombok today?
International flight connections. Before COVID, there were actually more international flight connections than there are now. Although the number of tourists visiting annually since COVID is up about 70%. It's a chicken and egg situation. The airlines are waiting for the big 5-star hotels to open. The hotel investors are waiting for the direct international connections to build the hotels. It's going to happen eventually, but it's been a bit of a slow process so far. Just one more major international destination, for example, Australia, would completely change the scenario for Lombok's tourist market. And this is what we really need to put Lombok on the map. So far, the international flight connections are to Singapore and Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur. And that's not much. So if we add Australia, then that would really be a game changer. And of course, once tourism takes off, property investment follows. For example, on the project that I'm working on at the moment, I'm projecting that it takes 7 years to complete this development. It's not because the construction is challenging, that's going to be quick. It's mainly due to the fact that there's 440 villa plots to sell, plots of land. And, currently in the market, it just takes time to absorb that number of villa plots at the current pace. But with more direct flights, that could be substantially reduced.
Many investors understand Bali, but far fewer have seriously analyzed Lombok. What are they missing by stopping their analysis at Bali?
A lot of tourists and people just want a five-star resort and a beach, and they can get that in Bali. But for those that are a bit more adventurous, it's a real shame to stop at Bali because Indonesia has 17,000 islands. Bali has Denpasar Airport. It's got flight connections to everywhere. And the island boomed on the back of that. And it now has a huge tourism industry. However, they didn't plan for it in the sense of urban planning. And it's overcrowded. Roads are congested. Too much of the beachfront has been taken by five-star hotels. Not enough for the public. And when you get that sort of dynamic, people go elsewhere. And in Bali's case, the original areas like Kuta and Legian are currently completely uncool, and new areas replace them, like Seminyak and Canggu. Essentially, people moved up the coast. But now Seminyak is also overdeveloped, and people have moved to Canggu further up. And eventually that'll get overdeveloped as well. And of course, when places go out of fashion, property values drop, and they rise in the new areas that are coming up. You can't drive around Bali in a car anymore. There's too many people on the streets. It's too dangerous. I mean, if you drove like you drive in Australia, you'd hit someone. You can get around on a scooter, but for families with kids, they tend to just stay in their resorts. Lombok's been able to plan ahead, and they've seen what has happened on Bali. And as a consequence, we've actually got good infrastructure over there, and it's wide open. So in my opinion, Bali is getting more and more limited, and Lombok represents itself as the family-friendly choice. And, I guess just specifically for investment, I think that sometimes by not being a bit broader in your outlook, you can miss important opportunities. And for development, the sort of investors that would invest in a development project, the potential of Lombok and specifically this project is that you're in a large multi-year land development project. And that will bring opportunities and benefits that we can't foresee now and haven't been factored into the business plan or the returns. But I'm sure that over this 7-year development period, there are going to be massive upside surprises. And I think those tailwinds will far surpass an investment, for example, into an apartment complex on Bali, where an investor might get 15 to 20% per year for 2 years, and that's it. And for individual investors, the buyers of the plots that we're going to be selling, or the apartment or the villa in Bali, whatever the case may be, I think that by choosing to go with an established market rather than the emerging market, if you go with an established market such as Bali, you'd certainly have greater certainty around any rental return forecasts. But land values in Bali are about 10 times higher. And the population can't keep growing for the reasons we've already discussed. And those two factors are going to limit your upside. Additionally, as a lifestyle choice, I think that Lombok's actually a nicer place to be. And you get to build a grand, iconic villa with sweeping sea views for the same money that in Bali you would get something comfortable and modest.
Your project is adjacent to Mandalika, the government-backed tourism development on Lombok's south coast. Why does that adjacency matter strategically?
It matters a lot. for several reasons. The government chose the most beautiful beaches on the south coast for Mandalika. They've got about 20 kilometers off the coastline. And that says something about the beauty of the area where our peninsula is located. And as well, we're a very short distance, about a kilometer from the most beautiful beach on Lombok, which is a part of the Mandalika. It's called Tanjungan. It's a horseshoe-shaped bay, and it's truly one of a kind. And if you go to Lombok, you'd be sure to visit it. And it's really nice to be close. Secondly, I'd say infrastructure. The infrastructure has been done around the Mandalika and within the Mandalika. We've got great roads, we've got street lighting, we've got some underground electricity cables. That's important because Lombok can get really severe storms in the wet season in December, January. And when you're there during one of those storms, you actually can feel quite vulnerable, particularly if you're in an area where, the power lines can come down, roads can be completely flooded and partially wash away. So it really is important to have quality infrastructure. It's really connected. There's a bypass to the airport from Mandalika, and the trip's 20 to 25 minutes on that bypass rather than being 45 minutes. And where we are, we benefit from all of that, which is fantastic. A related point, but I mentioned earlier the urban planning issues in Bali. And by being next to Mandalika, our urban planning's done for us. The risk of overcrowding is gone. We're going to maintain a low density development within the project to protect the lifestyle of the villa owners and protect their property values. Urban planning protects the property values, and it may be something which is a bit hard to grasp for people who've grown up in well-ordered suburbs where everyone followed the building code, of course. But when you don't have urban planning, it represents a real risk, as it has with Bali. And of course, property investment needs to be, at the very minimum, a good store of value. Ideally, and of course we all hope that it will appreciate, and urban planning is part of that. I think that this area where we are will become the premium area on Lombok in the future, and arguably it's already there now. But I think that in the future, this is where the billionaires will come and buy their land, build their big villas and that sort of thing.
Yes, we wish that you are right with your forecast there with the billionaires. So Bali has suffered from congestion, overbuilding, and infrastructure pressure. How can Lombok avoid repeating the same mistakes?
Lombok's already master planned the Mandalika, and the infrastructure is there. So I'm not worried about our area. But for other areas of Lombok, local government needs to be forward-thinking, plan for increased population of tourists and permanent residents to service those tourists, and put in infrastructure and enforce planning rules. All of that's easier said than done in Indonesia. It's a developing country. There is corruption. Planning has never been a forte, and in many cases, governance has been lacking. And of course, it's a risk for Lombok because the more an area develops, then the more the risk of, overdevelopment. And Lombok has been labeled one of the 10 new Balis by the Indonesian government. The 10 new Balis are essentially 10 new areas that they want to promote for tourism to replicate Bali's success. Lombok's going to be the first of the 10 to develop, not least because it's right next door to Bali. nevertheless, some of these problems are systemic, and Indonesia is ranked 34 out of 100 on the Transparency's Corruption Index, where 0 is highly corrupt and 100 is very clean. There are many areas that the government needs to take a strong lead in, not just big infrastructure, but other services such as rubbish collection. And we advocate for various initiatives to improve planning, both at a local level, at a local village level, and with the government of Lombok. And I think the focus, in our message, one of the messages that we do focus on is that there is an alignment of interests, and we emphasize that the personal economic interests of the people that we're talking to, and that if such initiatives are implemented correctly, then the island, the local population, and the people that are in charge are going to benefit by being far more prosperous. They'll feel it in their back pocket with the rise in property values and business opportunities.
Yes, indeed. So let's turn to the land itself. What makes this 77-hectare peninsula difficult to replicate?
It's 75 hectares, but anyway, a couple of hectares here or there. It's a peninsula which is unique in itself, and it's centrally located with great infrastructure, and it's a large coastal landholding. And it's actually the last large coastal landholding in any kind of central location on South Lombok. To give you a sense of the difficulty of getting a piece of land, a large piece of land like this, I'll just go into the history a bit. This particular peninsula was acquired over 20 years, property title by property title. A total of 110 titles were acquired over that period. That's 110 negotiations with 110 owners. And it took 20 years. If you were going to try and get a large landholding together now on South Lombok, you would have to acquire the titles in the same way, one by one. It would take time and patience. You'd have to go to undeveloped areas, which are difficult to get to, that have no amenities around them for tourism, such as cafes, restaurants, any other sort of entertainment. So they're essentially not ready for tourism, and whatever land that you acquired would not be sellable or valid for doing any kind of resort or whatever until those areas improve. And sort of timing, of course, is always going to be a risk on that sort of thing. And naturally, in those areas, you'd have bad infrastructure, meaning bad roads, regular blackouts. And when you had a problem, for example, a blackout, you'd probably find that it's you asking the government to come and fix it, and probably just you. So you'd certainly feel isolated. And if you wanted to spend the time doing this sort of thing, you could look around, but you could also look at other areas in other islands in Indonesia and, make your decision about where you possibly could take on this sort of endeavor and when that location would start to develop, so that if you actually managed to acquire the land, you could realize the fruits of your labor by developing it. So it's just a time-consuming and costly procedure to undertake.
Yeah, the proposed concept includes serviced villa plots, resort land, commercial areas, beach clubs, cafes, roads, walking paths, and green areas. How do these elements work together as an ecosystem rather than as separate real estate parcels?
Well, it's a big project, and what we're going to create there is a big community of villa owners about 440 villa plots. So it's actually big enough to be called a small suburb. The core of the plan is to provide the land plots for owners to build their own villas. We'll have strict rules to ensure that owners don't overbuild and we can maintain the right character for the community. I intend to make it family orientated and to have facilities such as walking paths so that residents can enjoy running and cycling on the cliff tops. I want green areas and a large children's playground. So being family friendly is part of the core value proposition. We'll have commercial, in the sense of beach clubs and cafes to service the residents, but also for outsiders to come and utilize. And I've marked out land for a luxury resort, which is about 8 of the 75 hectares. And a luxury resort will add value to the whole community. And it will likely be possible to build some villas that are branded, as residents and leased out with the resort. But these sort of plans, add-on sort of plans, will start formulating when we're a couple of years in. Because it's a big project, the focus is on developing the residential areas, and we'll do the commercial later. And we'll look to add value through building later as well. But those things are not actually in the current budget or the current business plan, and will be agreed upon with the shareholders when the time comes.
VC believes that value often comes from cross-pollination, applying lessons from one sector, geography, or market to another. What can Lombok learn from Bali, Nusa Dua, Dubai, Portugal, the Caribbean, or other premium resort destinations?
Well, it's a tourist destination, and Indonesia, of course, is also a place that many foreigners choose to live. And over the last 3 decades, since the Asian financial crisis, Indonesia has been very prosperous. I'm developing a community of property owners. They may choose to live at their villa, they may choose to rent it to tourists, and a lot of them may choose to do both. What I'd like to see for the people that want to spend significant time in Indonesia is, firstly, in regard to visas, being easy and welcoming in regard to long-term visas for foreigners. The current visa situation is acceptable, and long-term visas are available, but it could be further improved. And additionally, on my wish list would be a path to permanent residency available for foreigners. Examples are Hong Kong and Singapore, where after 7 years, you can apply for permanent residency. And of course, permanent residency encourages commitment and investment in a place. And the contribution made by foreigners in Hong Kong and Singapore is undeniable, and it's been a win-win situation for those places. So I'd really like Indonesia to adopt this. I'd also like Indonesia to simplify the legal structure for foreigners to own property. We currently have a situation where the best property title available to foreigners is called HGB. And it gives good property rights. It's a leasehold that is extendable to 80 years. And it's owned by a company. So you can set up an Indonesian company that owns the title to, for example, your villa plot. And the Indonesian company can be wholly foreign owned. But it would simply be better if you didn't have to have the company layer in there. I should also mention that although you've got an 80-year lease, you never have to sell for the remaining value of that lease. Even if you pass it on to the next generation, and 80 years is coming up or whatever it is, because at any point during that 80-year leasehold, you can sell your villa to an Indonesian national and they can convert it to freehold. So, it's a situation where you will retain the value in perpetuity. But anyway, that's my wish list for property rights. That simply we could have a system which is a little easier to administer than having to actually have an Indonesian company. I'd also mention, of course, urban planning, which we already touched on. But there's currently a bit of a crisis in Bali. And I think even without good urban planning on Lombok, for example, if they don't keep up the planning in line with the development that is coming, any sort of crisis is a long way off because it's still wide open. But we are advocating for such planning because we believe that the government has a responsibility to plan well for the sake of all residents on Lombok, naturally, especially the local population.
Could this project become more than land sales? For example, a managed villa platform, a branded residence concept, hospitality operating platform, or a recurring management fee business?
Yes, certainly. It could become all of the above. It will definitely become a recurring management fee business because we'll have 440 villa plots and be maintaining the community. It's a situation where we have a very simple business plan at the moment to put in infrastructure, roads, electricity, etc., and sell villa plots. We're going to have to take on some debt to get this all done. But once the debt has been repaid, then we'll have the flexibility to adopt more ambitious plans. And we could certainly explore the possibilities of, branded residences with the resort, beach clubs, and other interesting concepts.
Yes, the document is clear that the current plan is still preliminary and that key assumptions need to be verified, including title, ownership, zoning, purchase price, development costs, financing, legal structure, and tax assumptions. What needs to happen next to make the project fully investment ready, and what type of investor or strategic partner would be the best fit?
Well, we need to get into due diligence to confirm some of the key assumptions in the plan. And the time for this will be when we have interest in the preferred equity piece and are able to sign an LOI. The preferred equity piece is 12 million US dollars. Of the most important work we'll be doing is a proper topographic master plan of the site. And after that, I'll be able to put out some of the key works for quotes. And this, of course, is necessary to confirm the plan. The land ownership verification is a lot of work because there are 110 land titles and each one needs to be verified. And there could be some adjustments in area. There often are in this sort of thing. So in our plan, we have budgeted for a total cost of 64 million, which includes land, infrastructure, and finance cost. And to fund this, we plan for 16 million of equity investment, 17 million of debt investment, and that's our total external investment of 33 million and 31 million of pre-sales. We get to 64. So we need the equity now. The equity, 16 million, includes 4 million by the developer, that's Altai Land, and 12 million of preferred equity that we're currently looking for. And once we've got that, we'll be able to close on the project, start the pre-sales and the infrastructure works. And we are planning to take the debt on at month 18 to fund remaining land payments. In terms of partners, for the preferred equity, we we need someone that likes a long time frame, up to 6 years. Now, many investors like shorter time frames, but some are okay with longer time frames, particularly private equity firms who have closed-end funds, because they raise money, they put it out, and when it comes back, they have to return it to their limited partners, their investors. And so over a longer time frame, you subsequently, earn your annual return for a longer period, and you get a higher multiple. On the preferred equity piece, I'm expecting that the multiple is going to be about 3. So on the 12 that are invested, about 36 will be returned. And for the debt, it comes in after month 18. The project, of course, at that point will look very different. Sales will be happening. A lot of the infrastructure will be there. We plan to pay up to 20% per annum as a rate of return. The debt is also a relatively long sort of investment for the lender. It's over 4 years, but they won't be waiting for 4 years to recover all of that return. It gets returned, as the villa sales come in. So I don't think that we will necessarily be able to definitively line up the debt investment by the time we close on the project. Mostly because, at month 18, the debt investor will come in, and anything that they agree to now would be highly conditional upon the business plan being executed satisfactorily, sales project and infrastructure in place and all that kind of thing. But nevertheless, we'll be able to make sure that we mitigate our risk on the debt finance before we close.
If you had to summarize the opportunity in one sentence for investors, resort operators, or strategic partners listening today, what would you say?
I'd say this is a unique opportunity on Lombok Island, and it won't be possible to find anything as significant as this project in the future. Come and visit Lombok, see for yourself. It's going to have a future every bit as good as Bali, I'm convinced. And investing in premium land in a growing economy with a rapidly growing population always surprises to the upside.
Thank you, Oliver. This conversation was not only about land, hospitality, or Lombok. It was about timing, vision, and recognizing value before it becomes obvious. At VCA, we often speak about finding the missing piece. Here, that missing piece seems to lie at the intersection of a unique coastal site, Mandalika's development, improving infrastructure, international connectivity, disciplined urban planning, and the right strategic partners. You also made an important point. Lombok does not need to become another Bali. The opportunity is to build something more controlled, spacious, family-oriented, and resilient over the long term. Of course, proper diligence remains essential. Title, zoning, master planning, costs, financing, and execution all need to be verified. But that is where serious opportunities are created by understanding risk, structuring it properly, and bringing the right partners together. For VCA, this is exactly the kind of opportunity that sits in the unknown space. Many investors know Bali. Far fewer have seriously looked at South Lombok or considered how land, tourism, hospitality, capital, and estate management could become one integrated ecosystem. So, to investors, resort operators, family offices, developers, and strategic partners listening today, if this conversation has made you curious, the next step is to look closer. Oliver, Thank you again for sharing your perspective on the Altai Land vision with us and to our audience. Thank you for listening to the VCA podcast. See you in the next episode.